Hi guys, welcome to Vote Sports. Today let's talk about Chelsea. The Chelsea manager Maresca came out to say he is only working with 21 players, that he doesn't know where the rest of the players is, that they are training on their own or whether they are going to stay or leave, that he does not care, that whether the media is saying that he's working with 41 players is false. Now, it's going to be a problem because Chelsea is trying to offload so many players. Now, this particular talk that he gave, this conference that he gave, will probably bring a bad condition to Chelsea's players, because most players out there are trying to offload Sterling, trying to offload Lukaku, and so many players. Now we are going to talk about that. What the impact of that press conference will be making at Chelsea? Because for me, it's quite disrespectful for a coach to come and say something like that to the press. Okay, guys, if you look at that conference Maresca did yesterday, he was talking about he is working with just 21 players, that he doesn't care what happens to the rest of the players. Don't you think it's disrespectful to the players that are contracted to a club at any particular point in time?
Of course, it's disrespectful to players. It's disrespectful to, the team around him, because these players are players. They didn't bring themselves to Chelsea. Chelsea went out of their way to cut them, to sign them, to put them on 6, 7, 8 year deals and keep them at the club. Okay, so it doesn't cut Chelsea in good light also in the media, because it just looks like a manager throwing his players under the bus. And a lot of fans are going to say, yeah, the Chelsea squad was bloated, they have 40 something players in the side and all about that. But the thing for me from this conversation is, you came out to do a press conference and you say you only know of 21 players that are working with you, and another 15 out of the remaining 20 something could go, that there is a possibility for 6 of the remaining 20 could still work with you later on in the season, but they are all training outside the first team. And I feel like coming to say that just after the first week of the Premier League is off, if there's any time for this brutal honesty, it should have been when he took over the realms of the club at the end of the season, before pre-season started. You come out, you make this declaration. Players have 2 months to look for an alternative, because these are professionals. These are also human beings, and players have rights in the Premier League. So to come and say that now, after the first week of the Premier League games have already happened, and it's just barely 7 or 8 days left in the transfer market, it's crazy for me, because at the end of the day, these players are not obliged to leave Chelsea. They have a contract. They can decide to sit down and run down their contract. You can't force them out.
It's not forcing anybody out. He just said his mind.
Yeah, you can say your mind, but you don't need to throw anybody under the bus to say your mind.
Mind you, when he made that statement, he didn't call names. We only know about rumors linking Broha, what's it called, Chaloba, and the rest of many other players, Sterling and some other players, and Ben Chilwell. Okay, the only name he mentioned was Ben Chilwell, when he said he doesn't fit into his style. Well, he said Sterling arrived to camp early. He liked the kind of, but it's just like, I have to see. I like you personally, but for my squad, you're not welcome. You understand? It's just clear message to Ben Chilwell, but it was a clear calling of name to. I'm sorry, it's a clear message to Sterling, but it was a clear calling of name for Ben Chilwell. That's the only place I fault him. Those two players. Then the board is saying they don't want this, they don't want that. Lukaku was already being bid after by Napoli, so you see that he only mentioned this because he felt like the media is always raving about the list of players Chelsea keeps signing, and yet when you look at these players, they are players that could be playing for the reserves, not even for the first team. So when we keep calling players that Chelsea bought, Gui and the rest of them, all these players are going to play for the reserves. We're looking for Chelsea to go into the market and get big name players, which they've done so far this season. When they brought in Luis, they brought in Pedro Neto, and they took away Sterling's number and gave it to him. So which
is disrespectful.
That's the disrespect there. But it also tells you that, oh boy, I like you, but we got a new player that could fit into my style of play, and I think I will be play him ahead of you. So please, if you can help us find room somewhere else. And it's a message. It was welcome speech, but for Ben Chilwell, it was clear-cut disrespectful. I agree with John there, because he told him straight up, you're not welcome here. I don't need you. You don't fit into my style. It was like direct message to Ben Chilwell. But the rest of the 15 players or 21 players, as we may say, the 21 players that are outside this first team 21, it's going to be tough when Chelsea are looking for replacements for injuries. And you look at these players, you already said they don't fit into your plan. and maybe they are training with the reserves, they are training with the under 23s, the under 17s, and so on, and they are playing in the EFL league, somewhere down the amateur league, and you need them to play for you, and they don't feel the confidence of playing for your team. At some point, I feel like he should have at least said it in a way that he respects them, but he doesn't know if they would fit. Like, I don't know if they'll fit into my style, but it wasn't name calling. It was just that they have many of these players they bought to play for the reserves that we keep calling first team players.
So the question now is, when Maresca did that press conference, he looks uncomfortable saying all those things. Now, the question is that, is it the board that is forcing him to do all those things? Because if you look at the way they treated Connor, the way the board it's board that told him that you are not welcome in this Chelsea squad. It's not actually Maresca, but probably Maresca might have returned Chalobah too. But now the board that nobody is saying anything from the top. Now it's Maresca that is now coming to the media to talk about players leaving, players staying. So do you think it's under pressure for him to do this particular press conference to the media?
It's not under pressure. Today is a match day. We are forgetting that today is Thursday, match day for Europa League and UEFA Europa League and UEFA Europa Conference League playoffs have been happening today. I think they are playing the preliminary stages today. Yes. So I think for that press conference to hold is because they have a match day today. You know, Wednesday, Thursdays for Europa Conference League and Europa League. So that press conference was supposed to hold, and media would always ask you.
That's the point.
The media will always ask you.
Even when they play in the weekend, they will still ask him about those particular incidents.
So he just needs to clear the air and tell us, see, people keep saying Chelsea buy players. We only know about 21. In Man United, at some point, I think under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, they bought many players, which some of them I always mention on this show. One of them recently would be leaving for Panathinaikos in recent days. Maybe he left yesterday and he dropped a message to the Man United fans, and he was bought for Man United. The guy we are playing now for Man United was bought from Atlanta, and he's been playing with the reserves for some time. But there was no disrespect to him. Amad Diallo, he has been playing with the reserve, but he was bought from Atlanta senior team. There was no disrespect to him when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer bought them in. I think these players that Chelsea keep buying in, I think it's for the future. We keep saying this present now. Most of these players, 75% of these players Chelsea bought were for the future. I think they are sending them to the reserve.
Excuse me, I think I take a difference to that aspect. Like you say, you're buying a player for the future. Which future? When you consistently buy first team players, you consistently farm out reserve players on loan, and then you consistently sell off the reserve players to make a profit. So let's call it what it is. You're doing business. You're not buying players for the future.
I think the problem with the fans is that it depends on how much Chelsea are paying for these players. You cannot play a 17-year-old, buy a 17-year-old for 20 million pounds and expect him to play in the reserve. So that's why people keep talking about Chelsea buying a whole lot of players. I understand they are buying the 17 years, the 18 years, 19 years. It's fine. But the issue is that the money they are spending on these players is the issue.
Let's also look at another tangent now, because you are saying that the bulk of players that are bulking up that squad are players that were bought for the reserve team that are not necessarily first team players. Let's look at a couple of signings too in that same Chelsea side that were brought in for big money that are not getting any minutes. You have Datro Fofana, the striker, in that side. He's not getting any minutes. Nobody's talking about him. So he's clearly not a part of the 21 that Maresca is working with. So that means he's part of the 24 that need to be moved on. That is a signing that was brought in for how many millions of pounds? You have a couple of other players there. Okay, let's talk about another one that's not been playing, having game time or working out with it. You have Mudryk in there. What happens to Mudryk? You've signed in a Neto to play in his position. He's also there. If you go back, you look at, you have the Kani Chukwuemeka, you have the non-Imadueke. There are so many players that were brought in that these players are just occupying space in that squad. They haven't featured in game time for this side. And you can't tell me that the media are hyping this club because it's bloated. Under Pochettino, they had 35 players, right? Now they have close to 44. That's 8 signings added to what was with Pochettino. If you have a bloated side at 35 players last season, when the Pochettino was crying that the dressing room was crowded, you now grew it to 44 or 42. Like, are you helping yourself, or you are destroying yourself?
Even when Pochettino was crying that there was a bloated side, you still see an 18-man on the side when Pochettino plays. There's always
Regardless.
an 18 team. It's only but there's no if at Tottenham Hotspur, Pochettino never had a team more than 22. Now, the only person that had the smallest squad in the Premier League so far was Nuno Espirito Santos at Overton Wanderers when he had about 19 players playing in the Premier League, the Europa League, and the FA Cups and Carabao Cups. He had 19 players so far in that particular season. And yet, Chelsea and Pochettino has never grown their team beyond 22. So you can't tell me he had 35 players and he was
Go
complaining.
look at the records last season. 35 players in the Chelsea side last season.
They keep infusing team and players from the youth setup to train with them players they bought for the reserves.
That's the problem. I think the
Players
problem
they bought for the reserves who came in for big money. You're not telling me
like you say. I think Amad Diallo was bought by Man United for about 10 million. What's it called? Daniel James was bought for about 15 million and was sold for about 25. That was the only profit they made. Now, Pelistri, on the other hand, Facundo Pelistri was bought for about 10 million or so. And how much is it being let go for? 8 million or so. Which means they are making, Man United is making loss. I'm not talking about Man United. I'm just saying, for Chelsea, it's almost the same thing. Because even the likes of Loftus-Cheek that came and played for Chelsea, Tomaris and all of that, we're not being brought up from their 8 years old up. They bought some of them for about 15 or 18 years old, which means they paid some training fee to the club they were bought from. And at some point, they were let go for free. Some of them were let go on loan, on multiple loan. And after that, they were sold for maybe 20, 30 million pounds. It's just that the problem I have is you buy these young players, these young prospects, for a heavy fee that you're not supposed to buy them.
That's the problem.
So I'm not saying they are first team players. I'm just saying they buy them to play for the reserves for a very big fee, which is not right. These players should not be bought for more than 10 million pounds, 6 million pounds at most, 50 million pounds. But you buy this player for 20, 30, 50 million pounds. The guy they bought from Barcelona, Gui, also about 35 million pounds, which on a normal day, you're not supposed to pay more than 50 million pounds for Gui. But now you bought him for 25 million pounds. He's still going to play the EFL League, the Premier League Amateur League. And you're looking to buy another striker in. You already have this guy. I'm not going to compare them with Man United because they're not on the same level now. But you already have this guy, you already have Gui, you already have Fofana, who you brought in from France about 2 years ago or so, that is a good striker, and you still want to bring in an Osimhen. There's still the likes of
Breuer.
Amanda Breuer, who is you're looking for how to ship out on loan. He's been on the setup. He was brought in at the age of 14 or 15 to that side, and he's been on multiple loan spells after loan spells, and now you're finding a way to sell him off permanently. So I'm just saying you buy this young prospect. I'm just saying even under the time of Abramovich, because Breuer wasn't bought under Todd Bowley, was bought under Abramovich, and many of these players I mentioned were bought under Abramovich's era. So you buy all these young prospects for a heavy fee, for a fee worth more than an average player, and an average player on his peak, and you want to play them in the reserves, and yet you're not winning any trophies in that reserve competition. I don't see why.
Just to add more further into this conversation now, you buy these players young. What do you expect as a club when you buy somebody at 13, 14, 15? They play 4-5 years with you. They graduate from the youth setup. Where do they move to? They move to the first team pool. That's the thing. So that's the thing.
Find a club that would pay the right price.
Sorry, let me just land my point. If you sign them, you are signing players for the youth. You are signing players for the youth. They will have a future at Chelsea. After 4-5 years, they are out of the youth setup age-wise. They are into the pool of first-team players you have in the side. So if you are not moving them on, you are creating a problem because these guys will keep graduating out of the youth academy, moved into the first-team fray, and the first-team fray gets bloated. It's a problem that Chelsea have created for themselves. Let's not forget that close to 4-5 seasons ago, Chelsea had about 35 players out on loan from the youth setup. 35 players out on loan from the youth setup. And they keep season on season adding more players to that youth setup, telling us that they have a future at the club. We all know what that future is. Exit for cash. And it's something that Chelsea should live with because that's the bet they've laid.
Okay, finally, Joao Felix, he is moved now permanently to Chelsea. Where do you see him play in that forward line? Where do you see him as a striker, as a second striker, or as a winger?
Before, I'll say it again. If I'm looking at that Chelsea side now, if there's a Jackson starting, if they're not buying Osimhen anytime soon, if there's a Jackson starting, it's going to be tough, Jackson scoring goals, because these players would not give you chances and you consistently miss it, and they will continue to give you. Joao Felix can bury those chances. Palmer can bury his chances. Christopher Nkunku can bury his chances. Pedro can bury his chances. So I think these 4 players I've mentioned can bury their chances. And if the 4 of them are starting alongside Jackson up front, then they will not be giving him passes anymore. They will be scoring goals for themselves. They create their chance, they bury their chances. And it's going to be a problem for Nicholas Jackson, or perhaps the way they call him in the fan base, Michael Jackson, to dance around the post anymore. He would have to be dropped to the bench. But I believe if you look at Chelsea, if Osimhen is coming in, it's going to be a very dangerous attack for defenders. Where you have Joao Felix on the left, Pedro on the right, and Osimhen up front with Palmer behind them. Or maybe you can say have a Joao Felix on the left, Christopher Nkunku on the right, Osimhen up front, and Palmer still. It's just either ways, Pedro or Nkunku on the right, Felix or Modric on the left. Defenders will be scared to their bones if you see them coming.
For me, I totally disagree, because in this scenario now, let's work from first principles right now. Osimhen is not in the team, so you can't work with Osimhen in the lineup. So for me, I'm just giving an instance. Just calm down. So you can't work with him in any potential lineup. So coming into the side now, I see Felix starting as a false 9 in that 9 position, with Nkunku and Neto beside him, or Nkunku and Mudryk wherever on the flanks, and Palmer behind him. Now, if you end up signing an Osimhen, you have to play Joao Felix behind him. Simple.
If you look at the formation the coach is playing, he doesn't really play a player behind. That's why he doesn't really play a player behind a striker. That's why he actually moved Palmer to the right, because he couldn't fit in Palmer in that midfielder. So that's going to be a problem. So if he has now saying is either he's changing his formation, or if he's playing the same thing he played last weekend, that means Palmer can play in the midfield.
But the scenario now is that, even looking at the formation for last weekend, that formation was a disaster, because you have 3 defensive midfielders occupying the core of the midfield. You have Lavia and Caicedo back to back behind and Enzo Fernandez, which shouldn't be. Palmer should be playing in that 10, and then you have Enzo and Caicedo, or you have Caicedo and Lavia with Enzo maybe on the bench or whatever. So that position is carved out for Palmer rather than him playing off the wing, because that position is his best position. So if you are telling me you are moving Palmer off that position and you want to play Enzo off there, then we know that that's a dummy formation. You are playing a 4-5-1 flat.
We're talking off our hearts, but let's go back to the way Leicester City played last season before they came back. Maresca was the coach in charge. He was playing a 4-4-2 flat formation. Yes? Left, right wingers, 2 strikers up front. Maybe 1 striker and 1 false 9. Then 2 midfielders, 2 center midfielders, which at some point it could switch into being a 4-2-3-1 formation. They can switch. It's a fluid front 6. You understand? And that's what the man has always played, a fluid front 6, where there's 1 defensive midfielder that is not going forward, but 1 is always running box to box, and the other players are always running from the flank. And I think that was why he played Palmer on the flanks in the first team, and played a false 9 in maybe Enzo in that team, and was trying to defend against Man City. Maybe that was why he was trying to defend so much against Man City. But I believe that's just wrong. You understand? So I think if he's going to go into the Premier League playing a 4-4-2 flat formation, he should know where to fix Palmer. If it's 1 defensive midfielder and 1 box-to-box midfielder, then we'll know Palmer is playing a false 9 with the front 9, with the front player.
I think part of the problem that he doesn't think that Palmer can press well in the midfield. That's part of the problem. If you look at Odegaard is lanky, he's not that big, but you see he presses well. But Palmer is like a Ajebo player, he just takes it slow.
But then
that's why he probably moved into the wings.
But then he did 22 goals last season and about 13 assists. So
and to play from the wings, you need to know how to press well. You need to press the wing backs.
Apart from even to press, you need to know how to beat your defender one-on-one, because he cannot actually do it very well.
Palmer lacks that's the only area I think Palmer lacks now in taking on player take-ons. He doesn't have that.
That's
much
why he's good. It's bad for him to play from the wings. He can't.
I think
I didn't think he actually dribbled, and that game he didn't dribble anybody from that wing.
Seeing that, I'm thinking to myself, why are you playing a fish out of water? Put him in his role, put him in his play, play him to his strengths rather than force him out into the wings.
This is what will happen to see the best of Palmer if he's going to be playing a 4-4-2 flat formation, because that was what that formation he played on Sunday against Man City looks like. If he's going to play in a 4-4-2 flat formation, I think Palmer should be in the box, or perhaps in the middle with the striker up front, and all your midfielders, all your 4 midfielders, Nkunku, Casido and Lavia and one other player could just play in that for maybe a Pedro Neto, Nkunku, Lavia and Enzo. Then Casido could be on the bench, or maybe just pair those, because those three players will always fight for a spot in the defensive midfield position and will always fight for a spot in the box to box. So it's just any of these two players, Casido, Lavia and Enzo, and Pedro on the right and on the left. Then the two players up front.
Let's see what Chelsea is going to do. Maresca giving that press conference, most Chelsea fans thought that it was disrespectful for him to say that, but people are saying that they need a tough coach, that he's tough. Depending on how you want to see it, he said what he said, that he's met all these players and explained his thoughts to them. Now, based on his formation, what he's going to be doing, well, probably because of Manchester City, as the guys have talked about, probably he's trying to play safe with Manchester City. Everybody plays safe with Manchester City if you look at it that way. Probably in the next game, maybe today's game in the UEFA Conference League and in the weekend, we'll probably see a different Chelsea, because Felix is there. Now you have Nkunku, Palmer, Neto, Modric. Madueke has a whole lot of forward that you need to fit in and to play a nice football. Because Chelsea is looking, one of the things Chelsea is looking for is beautiful football. They want to play progressive football. Let's see what Maresca will be doing this week, and let's see how Chelsea will handle all these their crises and the players they have. See you next time.